What if I told you that Jesus Christ followed the exact same psychological law that creates every master in history? The 10,000-hour rule that Malcolm Gladwell revealed isn't just for athletes or musicians. It explains the most revolutionary spiritual transformation ever recorded. For 2,000 years, we've missed the hidden pattern in Christ's life that reveals how true mastery is born. The psychological truth behind his ministry will change how you see spiritual development forever. 3 shocking cases will expose this secret that religious scholars don't want you to discover. The initial mystery. Here's what most people don't understand about Jesus Christ. There's an 18-year gap in his story that changes everything. From age 12 to 30, the Bible goes completely silent. We see him as a brilliant child debating scholars in the temple. Then suddenly he appears as a master teacher who revolutionizes human consciousness. What happened during those missing years? Traditional Christianity tells us he was just a carpenter, quietly waiting for his time. But this explanation ignores a fundamental psychological principle that governs every expert who ever lived. Malcolm Gladwell's research revealed that mastery requires approximately 10,000 hours of deliberate practice. That's roughly 10 years of intensive training, 3 hours a day. The mystery deepens when you realize that Jesus didn't just teach religion. He demonstrated psychological mastery that modern neuroscience is only beginning to understand. His ability to read people instantly, transform personalities with a single conversation, and create movements that lasted millennia wasn't supernatural luck. It was the result of systematic preparation that follows a predictable pattern. Consider this. Every master in history has a hidden preparation period. Michael Jordan's invisible years of obsessive practice. Mozart's decade of composition before his masterpieces. Einstein's private struggle with mathematical concepts before relativity. The pattern is always the same. Intense preparation followed by seemingly sudden mastery. But here's what's shocking. Jesus' timeline fits this pattern perfectly if you know where to look. Those missing 18 years weren't empty. They were the most crucial training period in human history. And the psychological evidence is hiding in plain sight, waiting for someone to connect the dots and reveal how spiritual mastery actually develops. The first revelation that changes everything. Jesus spent those 18 years in intensive psychological and spiritual training, following patterns that modern psychology now recognizes as essential for developing extraordinary human potential. Archaeological evidence suggests Jesus traveled extensively during this period. Ancient trade routes connected Palestine to India, Egypt, and Greece, centers of advanced psychological and spiritual knowledge. The Silk Road wasn't just for commerce, it was a highway for ideas. Recent discoveries of Buddhist manuscripts in Egyptian monasteries prove these traditions were interconnecting centuries before Christ. But here's the psychological breakthrough. Jesus wasn't just learning different religions. He was synthesizing the deepest insights about human consciousness into a revolutionary new framework. Modern neuroscience reveals that this type of cross-cultural integration creates neural plasticity that leads to breakthrough insights. Look at the evidence hidden in his teaching methods. Jesus used parables, a sophisticated psychological technique that bypasses intellectual resistance and implants ideas directly into the subconscious. This wasn't common Jewish teaching. It mirrors advanced techniques found in Eastern traditions. He demonstrated perfect emotional regulation under extreme stress, suggesting years of meditation practice. His ability to read people's deepest thoughts points to developed empathy skills that require extensive training. The 10,000-hour rule explains everything. If Jesus spent 3 hours daily in intensive study and practice from age 12 to 30, that's exactly 10,000 hours. This wasn't casual learning. It was deliberate practice of consciousness transformation techniques. Consider his psychological sophistication. He could instantly identify people's core wounds and speak directly to them. He understood crowd psychology well enough to feed 5,000 people without chaos. He demonstrated perfect conflict resolution skills that de-escalated violent situations with words alone. These aren't natural talents. They're developed competencies that require systematic training. The most shocking part? His sudden appearance as a master teacher wasn't sudden at all. It was the predictable emergence of someone who had completed the psychological preparation phase and was ready to demonstrate mastery. The missing years weren't a mystery. They were the foundation of the greatest psychological revolution in human history. Think of it this way. Imagine you're watching a magician perform impossible feats on stage. The audience sees magic, but behind the scenes lies years of obsessive practice, studying techniques and mastering the psychology of perception. Jesus' ministry was similar. People saw miracles, but the real miracle was the psychological mastery he developed during those hidden years. Like a master magician who studies every aspect of human perception, Jesus studied every aspect of human consciousness. The Carpenter story is the perfect cover. Just like a CIA operative needs a believable civilian identity, Jesus needed a reason to be invisible while he developed his skills. Carpentry provided mobility. Carpenters traveled between cities for projects, giving him access to different teachers and traditions. It also provided credibility. People trust craftsmen because they work with their hands. But here's what most miss. Carpentry itself was psychological training. Every piece of wood has unique grain patterns that require careful study. A master carpenter learns to see hidden potential in raw materials and transform them into something beautiful and useful. This is exactly what Jesus later did with human beings. He saw the hidden potential in broken people and knew how to transform them. The 10,000-hour rule reveals the truth. There are no overnight masters. Every person who changes the world goes through an intensive preparation phase where they develop their skills away from public view. Jesus followed this exact pattern, which is why his ministry demonstrated such unprecedented psychological sophistication. This changes everything about spiritual development. It's not about waiting for divine inspiration. It's about deliberate practice of consciousness expanding techniques until you reach mastery level. Jesus proved this path works, but only if you're willing to put in the hours. Transition. If this is exploding your head, leave your like so more people can discover these hidden truths. But wait, because the second case is even more shocking. The deepening. The second mystery that reveals the psychological genius behind Christ's revolution. His baptism and 40-day wilderness experience weren't religious rituals. They were the final phase of advanced psychological training that modern neuroscience recognizes as essential for achieving peak human performance. Here's what traditional Christianity misses. The baptism wasn't about sin forgiveness. John the Baptist was operating an ancient transformation technology that Jesus had been preparing to use for years. Baptism was a consciousness-altering technique practiced by mystery schools across the ancient world, a method for triggering profound psychological shifts. But the real mystery lies in what happened immediately after. While everyone focuses on the religious symbolism, they miss the psychological sophistication of Jesus' wilderness experience. 40 days of isolation, fasting, and confronting temptation wasn't suffering. It was the most advanced mental training program ever recorded. Modern psychology now understands that extreme conditions like prolonged isolation and controlled stress create neuroplasticity that can fundamentally rewire the brain. Silicon Valley executives pay thousands of dollars for similar programs in sensory deprivation chambers and meditation retreats. Jesus was accessing this same technology 2,000 years ago. The three temptations reveal the psychological breakthrough he achieved. Each temptation targeted a specific aspect of human psychology that typically derails potential masters. material desires, ego validation, and power addiction. Jesus' responses weren't religious, they were demonstrations of complete psychological integration. Consider the psychological sophistication required. Under extreme physical stress, isolated from all human contact, Jesus maintained perfect clarity and emotional regulation. This level of mental mastery doesn't happen accidentally. It's the result of systematic training in consciousness control techniques that prepare someone for this exact test. The timing is crucial. This wilderness experience happened right before his public ministry began. It wasn't a random spiritual event. It was the final certification exam for psychological mastery. Like a pilot's final test before flying commercial aircraft, Jesus needed to prove he could maintain perfect mental control under extreme conditions before taking responsibility for transforming human consciousness. Here's the second revelation that changes everything. The 40-day wilderness experience was Jesus completing the most advanced psychological training protocol ever developed, a systematic method for achieving complete mastery over human consciousness that modern neuroscience is only beginning to understand. Ancient mystery schools across cultures developed similar isolation protocols because they discovered something profound. Prolonged periods of controlled stress combined with specific mental practices can fundamentally rewire human consciousness. The Dead Sea Scrolls reveal that Jewish mystical groups were using these exact techniques during Jesus' time. But Jesus' approach was revolutionary. Instead of using isolation to escape human psychology, he used it to master it completely. The 3 temptations weren't random tests. They were a carefully designed curriculum targeting the 3 psychological weaknesses that destroy most spiritual teachers: materialism, narcissism, and authoritarianism. The first temptation, turning stones to bread, tested material attachment. Most spiritual leaders eventually compromise their message for financial security. Jesus' response proved he had achieved complete freedom from survival anxiety. The second temptation, throwing himself from the temple, tested ego validation. Most leaders become addicted to proving their specialness. Jesus' response showed he had transcended the need for external validation completely. The third temptation, ruling all kingdoms, tested power addiction. This is where most revolutionary leaders fail. They start wanting to change the world and end up wanting to control it. Jesus' response revealed he had achieved something unprecedented: the psychological maturity to wield unlimited influence without being corrupted by it. Modern psychology calls this post-conventional moral development, the ability to operate beyond normal psychological limitations. Research shows this level requires specific types of training under controlled stress conditions. Jesus was accessing this technology through the Wilderness Protocol. The neurological changes were permanent. After those 40 days, Jesus demonstrated cognitive abilities that seem impossible: perfect emotional regulation under extreme stress, instant insight into people's psychological patterns, and the ability to maintain clarity while being tortured to death. These aren't supernatural gifts. They're the predictable results of completing advanced consciousness training. This explains his teaching effectiveness. Jesus wasn't just sharing religious ideas. He was operating from a completely different psychological platform that allowed him to see and communicate from beyond normal human limitations. The wilderness experience was his graduation from the most advanced psychology program ever designed. Imagine a Navy SEAL going through Hell Week, 7 days of almost impossible physical and mental challenges designed to break down normal psychological limitations and rebuild mental toughness. Most candidates quit, but those who complete it emerge with capabilities that seem superhuman to regular people. Jesus' 40-day wilderness experience was like Hell Week for consciousness itself. While Navy SEALs train their bodies to perform, Under extreme stress, Jesus was training his mind to maintain perfect clarity under the ultimate psychological pressure. The three temptations were like the final examination questions for a PhD in human psychology. Each one tested whether he had truly mastered a specific aspect of consciousness that typically corrupts even the most well-intentioned leaders. Think of it like a flight simulator for spiritual leadership. Pilots train for years, but before they can fly real planes with passengers, they must prove they can handle every possible emergency in simulation. The wilderness was Jesus's flight simulator, a controlled environment where he could face the exact psychological challenges that would destroy his mission if he wasn't properly prepared. The beauty of this system is its precision. Just like medical students must pass specific exams to prove they're ready to treat patients, Jesus had to pass specific psychological tests to prove he was ready to transform human consciousness without being corrupted by the power that comes with that ability. This reveals the hidden technology behind spiritual mastery. It's not about divine gifts or random inspiration. It's about systematic training that prepares consciousness to operate beyond normal human limitations. The Wilderness Protocol was the final phase of a training program that took 18 years to complete. Most spiritual teachers skip this preparation phase and wonder why they eventually burn out or become corrupted. Jesus proved there's a specific path to authentic spiritual mastery, but it requires the psychological courage to face your deepest limitations under extreme conditions until you transcend them completely. And subscribe now, because the third case coming next will completely change your perspective on human nature. The third and most important mystery that reveals the ultimate psychological secret. Jesus' 3-year ministry wasn't just teaching religion. It was the most sophisticated demonstration of applied psychology ever recorded, proving that human consciousness can be systematically transformed using specific techniques that work every single time. Here's what blows apart everything we thought we knew. Jesus didn't perform random miracles. Every healing, every teaching, every interaction followed precise psychological principles that modern neuroscience confirms actually work. He was operating a systematic technology for consciousness transformation that was so advanced, we're only beginning to understand it 2,000 years later. The evidence is overwhelming once you know what to look for. Jesus consistently used specific patterns. He always addressed people's core identity first, then their behavioral symptoms. He used strategic touch that triggers neurochemical responses, promoting healing. He spoke directly to people's subconscious through storytelling techniques that bypass mental resistance. But here's the shocking part. Every technique he used can be found in advanced psychology textbooks today. Carl Jung's individuation process, Viktor Frankl's logotherapy, Albert Ellis's cognitive restructuring. Jesus was using all of these methods before psychology was even invented as a field. The most mind-blowing evidence comes from his success rate. Modern psychotherapy helps about 60% of clients achieve meaningful improvement. Jesus' documented transformation rate approaches 100%. This isn't supernatural. It's what happens when someone has mastered human psychology so completely that they can identify and address the exact psychological pattern keeping each person stuck. Consider the systematic nature of his approach. He started with individuals, proving the techniques worked on every personality type. Then he expanded to small groups, demonstrating the methods scaled up. Finally, he trained a team to replicate his results, proving the system was transferable. The crucifixion reveals the ultimate psychological mastery. Under extreme physical torture and emotional betrayal, Jesus maintained perfect mental clarity and emotional stability. He even continued helping others while dying, demonstrating that his consciousness training had achieved something beyond normal human limitations. This wasn't a religious event. It was the final proof that the psychological training system he had developed could enable human consciousness to transcend any condition, including death itself. The resurrection becomes the ultimate psychological experiment, proving that consciousness trained to this level operates beyond normal physical constraints. Here's the final revelation that connects everything. Jesus created and demonstrated the world's first complete system for systematically developing human consciousness to its maximum potential, a psychological technology so powerful that it launched the largest transformation movement in human history and continues working 2,000 years later. The 3-year ministry was actually a carefully designed experiment testing whether advanced consciousness techniques could be scaled from individual transformation to mass movement. Jesus wasn't just teaching, he was proving that human psychology follows predictable patterns that can be systematically addressed to create permanent positive change. Look at the psychological sophistication. He used different approaches for different personality types. With analytical people like Nicodemus, he engaged in intellectual dialogue. With emotional people like the woman at the well, he connected through story and metaphor. With action-oriented people like Peter, he provided concrete challenges. This wasn't intuition, it was applied personality psychology. The disciple selection process reveals his understanding of group dynamics. Jesus chose 12 specific personality types that together created a psychological laboratory for testing how different people respond to consciousness training. Judas wasn't a mistake. He was the necessary psychological element to test whether the system could handle betrayal and failure. The teaching methods prove his mastery of cognitive science. Parables aren't just stories. They're sophisticated psychological tools that embed new mental frameworks below conscious resistance. The Sermon on the Mount isn't religious instruction. It's a complete reprogramming protocol for human consciousness that addresses every major psychological pattern that creates suffering. But here's what makes this revolutionary. Jesus proved that consciousness transformation isn't limited by social class, education, or background. Fishermen became psychological masters. Tax collectors became saints, prostitutes became teachers. The system worked for everyone because it addressed universal human psychological patterns. The ultimate proof is the movement's survival and growth despite impossible odds. 12 ordinary people, armed only with psychological training, transformed the Roman Empire within 300 years. This didn't happen through military force or political manipulation. It happened because they possessed technologies for consciousness transformation that actually worked. The pattern continues today. Every effective therapy, every successful personal development program, every genuine spiritual practice uses principles that Jesus demonstrated 2,000 years ago. He didn't just teach psychology. He created it by proving that human consciousness can be systematically developed to transcend its normal limitations. Imagine Steve Jobs developing the iPhone in secret for 10 years, then spending 3 years demonstrating its capabilities to prove it could revolutionize human communication. That's exactly what Jesus did with consciousness technology. Like Jobs, Jesus understood that revolutionary technology requires perfect execution to gain acceptance. The iPhone wasn't just a phone, it was a complete platform that changed how humans interact with information. Similarly, Jesus' ministry wasn't just religion, it was a complete platform for consciousness transformation that changed how humans interact with reality itself. Think of the disciples as Jesus' beta testing team. Just like Apple gives early iPhones to developers to identify bugs and prove the system works, Jesus gave his consciousness technology to 12 ordinary people to prove it could transform anyone. Their success rate validated the system and provided the confidence to launch globally. The crucifixion and resurrection were like the iPhone's public launch event. Jobs knew he needed one dramatic demonstration that would prove the iPhone's capabilities beyond any doubt. Jesus needed one dramatic demonstration that would prove consciousness training could transcend even death itself. The brilliant part is the viral marketing strategy. Instead of trying to convince everyone intellectually, Jesus programmed his disciples with psychological tools that would naturally spread. Like iPhone users who can't stop sharing how the device changed their lives, Jesus' followers couldn't stop sharing consciousness techniques that actually worked. The 3-year ministry was Jesus' reality distortion field, creating a psychological environment where impossible transformations became normal. Just like Apple employees learned to achieve things they never thought possible, Jesus' followers discovered they could develop abilities they never imagined having. This reveals the hidden pattern behind every revolutionary technology: intensive development, systematic testing, dramatic proof of concept, and viral distribution through satisfied users. Jesus wasn't just a spiritual teacher. He was the ultimate technology entrepreneur, launching a consciousness platform that continues upgrading human potential 2,000 years later. The 10,000-hour rule explains how he developed the technology, but the 3-year ministry proves it works for everyone willing to install the software. These 3 cases reveal the ultimate truth. Jesus Christ wasn't just a religious figure. He was history's greatest psychological scientist, spending 10,000 hours developing and then proving a complete system for maximizing human consciousness that modern psychology is still trying to understand. If these 3 cases exploded your mind, smash the like button and subscribe to not miss our next mysteries. And tell us in the comments which of these revelations surprised you most. Hit the notification bell so the algorithm doesn't lie to you. And if you know someone who needs to see this, share it, because these truths need to be known. Where hidden patterns reveal the extraordinary science behind ordinary people. This analysis is speculative and based on publicly available historical information, not clinical diagnosis. It represents one psychological interpretation of historical events and should not be considered definitive religious or historical truth.